Good. All right. Well, we'll get the ball rolling with this. Got about 29 people, and we'll let people trickle in. First off, I want to thank the Lansing Regional Chamber. Marcy, if you want to say hi and
Sure. I'm Marcy Rzepka. I'm one of the member relations manager at the chamber. Been there about 2 years, so I've worked with Melissa in the past. So we both sat in when Melissa Slotkin talked about these grants, and so we decided that it might be better to do this again and let some of the local people come on and ask more questions and get involved. So some business owners around here, some accountants for the business owners, Josh and Nicole and Carly, thank you very much for your time. Nicole, congratulations. I'm letting people in. People had sent questions beforehand. I'll be watching the chat for questions. Feel free to put them there. But Melissa's going to be your commentator for that. So we're good to get going. Melissa, if you want to kick this off, I'll keep letting people in.
Sounds good. So I'm Melissa Nay. I work with the Greater Lansing Convention and Visitors Bureau and work with a lot of the different restaurants in our area. And so I was integral in making sure that everyone apply, any restaurant that we have in our area, regardless if you support chamber, us, anything, gets the opportunity to apply for this grant because it is much needed funding to help keep you guys in business. So I'm going to throw it over to Josh, who is with Senator Gary Peters' office, and Nicole to give a bit of an update, and then we will do it as a kind of round robin. You can jump in, chime in, and ask your questions if you want to put it in the chat, and I can ask that question, or you can private message it to me as well, and we will get started. Thanks, guys.
Yeah, awesome. Thank you. Again, Nicole Noll Williams, I'm the Mid-Michigan Director for the Senator. I did just recently get offered a position out at the Capital Region International Airport. So I'll be with the team for another month or so. Carly Knott is also on the call. She's sharing her contact information, but I'm going to hand things over to Josh. I think in my conversation with Melissa, when I said, let me check and see if Josh is available. He is the meat and potatoes. He knows everything inside and out. If he doesn't, he knows where to find it. So he's a great asset for the Senator's team. And anyways, I'll hand it over to Josh.
Too kind, Nicole. We're very excited for you. Definitely going to miss you a lot. But as Nicole mentioned, so my name is Josh. I handle all economic policy for the Senator. That's tax, trade, small business, banking, insurance, housing, pension, Social Security, just a few big, ticket items here and there. And so I, as Nicole mentioned, have been running point on a lot of the recently passed bills, and particularly how they impact small businesses. And obviously this, focal point of the roundtable is going to be around the Restaurant Revitalization Fund, and can talk a little bit more about that. A little bit of myself really quickly. So I've been with the Senator for about 5.5 years now. I grew up in Ann Arbor and I went to Michigan State. So that's why I like meeting with the folks that are from Michigan, because they can kind of understand why that's a little, funky. But so I'm very excited to be here with you all. I think the sort of best way, I'll give a kind of, 5-minute, 30,000 foot view of a couple of the bills that we've passed recently. Obviously, the American Rescue Plan Act, most recently in early March, but also before that, there's some important pieces that were passed in the end of year spending bill back in December. And then after I do that, happy to open it up for Q&A. I know that Melissa sent over some advanced questions, which is super helpful. And I do want to be very upfront with everybody that this is still, we're operating in a semi-unknown space. There's still a lot of hurdles that the SBA has to go through. We know that there is a sort of fluid timeline in place in terms of rolling out the actual fund. And so things might change from this roundtable now to even tomorrow to a couple weeks down the line. So I do want to provide that disclaimer that things are moving and there's a lot of different moving pieces, and things may change from here to the actual enactment and rollout of the fund. So I'll start with the American Rescue Plan Act, $1.9 trillion bill passed in early March. A lot of great stuff for small business in there. And obviously the big thing is the $28 billion for the Restaurant Revitalization Fund. So it is largely structured around the $120 billion fund that was proposed in the Restaurants Act, which our boss is a very proud co-sponsor of, that would basically help a lot of restaurants get, back on their feet. They would get eligible for $5 million per location, but $10 million for a total restaurant group. And so food service businesses, including bars, restaurants, caterers that have fewer than 20 locations will be eligible. And those that have received PPP loans are eligible to apply. So we're very excited about that. So I know that some of the questions that we can touch on in a little bit kind of have to do with overlap with PPP, with the Shutter Venues Operator Grant, and we can dig into that in a little bit. So, you know, we're in this point right now where we had the SBA, I believe, I'm trying to find the exact staffer that testified in front of the Senate Small Business Committee last week, that basically said that we are, you know, a few weeks away from rolling this out, but there's still a little bit of uncertainty in terms of when it will actually be enacted. We're hearing that it will be hopefully sometime in mid-April. We know that the Shutter Venue Operator Grants is kind of the immediate priority right now for SBA, and we are told that that will be live hopefully by April 8th. You know, we'll see exactly when it goes live for applications, and then at that point, they will be able to take applications in. So the reason that they want to get the Shutter Venue Operator Grant out first is because they are fully expecting a massive influx of applications. I don't think that's going to surprise anybody, where, you know, we see that there's $28 billion for the program. There's probably a very strong chance that runs out almost instantaneously. So we've heard from Senate Majority Leader Schumer that if that happens, there's going to be opportunities to replenish the fund. And I don't think that will be necessarily that hard of a lift, considering, one, how much bipartisan support there was around the original fund. Again, that was $120 billion. And also how these bills kind of operate. For example, we just passed the PPP extension bill. I think the Senate vote was 94-6, and the House vote was 415-3. So things like that are, you know, again, I've been in Congress for 5.5 years, and I have seen the worst of times. And in a lot of cases, these are actually the best of times. We come together quickly on agreements like that and get quick relief out the door. So a little bit more about the fund for those that aren't totally steeped in the details. So grants from the fund, which is important to note that these are grants. We're very excited that this is not a loan. This is going to be a grant directly from the RRF. They can be spent on payroll and benefits, up to $100,000 a year on mortgage, rent, utilities, maintenance, supplies, food and beverages, supplier costs, operational expenses, and paid sick leave. The cover period that you can use it from is from February 15, 2020 through December 31st, 2021. So we have the end of this year. So the grants can be taken alongside, as I mentioned, the 2 rounds of PPP, if you got an EIDL loan, or if you use employee retention tax credits. But I do want to note that any PPP loans that you have already received will be subtracted from the eligible grant total for any individual restaurant. So for example, if you would have normally been eligible for $200,000 from the restaurant fund and you got a $100,000 PPP loan, you would only be able to get $100,000 from the RRF. Just want to make that clear. So I think that's kind of a high-level overview. I hope that was pretty helpful on how it'll actually work. Again, we're keeping a very close eye, and this is something that our boss has really been paying a close attention to, is exactly when the rollout is going to happen. And so we're very much eagerly awaiting some additional guidance, you know, how the actual application process will be rolled out. And, you know, just again, for total transparency, we're in the same boat as you all. We're just we're waiting to hear from the SBA. We're keeping a very close eye on this. I know that Senate Small Business Chairman Ben Cardin from Maryland has been in very close touch with Administrator Carranza, who was recently confirmed a couple of weeks ago, to make sure that this gets out as quickly as possible. So with that, I think I will turn it back over to, I don't know, Melissa or Marcy, whoever kind of wants to tee up the questions, and I will answer to the best of my abilities. And as Nicole mentioned, if I don't have the answer, which, you know, I know a decent amount of stuff, but there's definitely going to be some very, very in the weeds questions that we might not have the answer to. You know, I think I've already seen some emails being shared. I will make sure to share my email as well, just so we can stay in touch on this. We can find the answers from someone that's smarter than me and make sure to get those back as quickly as we can, because again, there is a very real chance that we're not going to have the answer immediately available. So I'll turn it back over to you all.
All right, well, one question that we received prior is, this is coming from a brewery that also has wholesale side of business as well as food and beverage. So he is wondering if we should separate our revenue from the pub from our wholesale revenue for the purposes of the grant. Said it doesn't seem fair for the other restaurants, et cetera. It's for us to include wholesale losses into our application of our grant. And then they understood that they deduct the PPP loans and other grants first. So how would you suggest they go about doing this? Or
Wow,
if you-
right off the bat with a very intricate and in the weeds question. So I totally understand the sort of disparity between wholesale and some more of the front facing costs. I do believe that the way that the grant is calculated is indeed in total revenue. So I think for the safety of making sure that when you apply, that you include that information, because again, I believe when they're doing the grants, they're going to take a holistic look at the business, at the restaurant. And so if that is included, and again, you have to provide all of the upfront costs that you have to total the right amount of money that you get from the fund. So I believe that would count. That might be something that we'll also have to check in with the SBA when they will inevitably roll out their guidance to make sure that when you do apply that you're following the right guidelines. But my immediate gut check is that you will have to include that. But again, we'll have to see exactly from the SBA when they provide their guidance, because as we've seen from PPP or EIDL or whatever, we put these programs together and then we immediately find out that, oh, there's a problem here with the intent of the legislation does not actually match up with the text, or, SBA has to actually get involved from a statutory thing. Quick anecdote, we heard about something like that as it relates to new restaurants being eligible. So we want to make sure that in the rollout of this, that is properly addressed. And again, we'll have to wait and see exactly what the case is, but my gut says that yes, you'll have to count it.
All right, a couple questions from the chat. My understanding is that there is no need to get the DUNS number or the SBAM registration as previously thought.
So I don't even know what DUNS and SAM stand for. Again, that's just going to be something that we're going to have to see exactly how it is roll out in the application process. And because we don't exactly know what the form is going to look like, let me see if there's anything available. I'm just going through my correspondence really quickly with Brian Spicazza, who's one of the folks that works in the SBA offices here in Michigan. But I don't know. I don't want to give any false information and have folks, looks like SBAM announced that they're not going to be asking for either one. So if that is the case, then no, I don't believe that you're going to need that. So appreciate that, answer coming from someone else in the chat, but I had admittedly not seen anything that was going to float either way. So looks like no.
Very good. Another question, this is a little bit off topic, but still very relevant within this, is the targeted EIDL. We've been in a holding pattern on this since February and claimed that was going to be open in 21 days. Have you heard anything further on that?
Yep. So we heard that the most recent update we got was that they were going to increase, the maximum idle, which is obviously very exciting for us to go from $150,000 to $500,000. And we know that basically April 6th is kind of the day that they're going to roll that out. There was a significant amount of money, I believe it was $10 billion for the targeted idle advances that was included in the American Rescue Plan. And so we believe that it will be, replenished hopefully soon. Again, April 6th is kind of the soft target date for what we're hearing on that. But, we know that was something that was immediately very popular and that was quickly no longer available, and also was rife with problems because, idle was like the one thing that was around before the pandemic that was, quite frankly, really not utilized nearly as much as it is now, because there was not the same sort of economic injury that was, we're experiencing on a widespread scale. So it took them a long time to really ramp that up and provide the funding necessary. So we believe it should be in the next week or so, hopefully. But again, we saw that it may be a little bit because as they're juggling, again, SVOG, Restaurant Fund, and getting that money out, hopefully it'll be soon. But we'll be keeping a very close eye on that. And so if you have also specific issues, you're trying to get an idle and you're being stonewalled by the SBA, or you're having specific problems, we've got a great casework team on the ground in Detroit that will physically help you with your applications and with processing through the SBA. They've got relationships with the actual casework staff. So if you have a specific issue for your business that you're either, you're saying that you're ineligible for an idle, or you're having trouble getting in touch with the SBA or whatever, I highly recommend that you get in touch with them, and their number I will just also quickly put in the chat so I make sure that you can give them a call, is 313-226-6020. And there it is in the chat as well.
All right, does anybody in the Zoom want to chime in with a question, or I'll keep reading from the chat?
I see a couple like good questions. Connie and Chris Chamberlain, Connie, have kind of the same question.
Mhm.
Is this expected to be a highly competitive program? And, you know, if there's 490,000 independent restaurants and the average eligible loss is 250,000, that's 122 billion worth of requests. You know, those are both hitting on very important pieces. As I mentioned, that we are fully expecting to hit that $28 billion fund very quickly. And so, again, I don't want to say this is maybe one of the many reasons why, but if Congress, you know, we're out of session for the next 2 weeks. And I think that's going to be important because there's, again, real chance here that the restaurant fund, as soon as it's enacted and applications that are eligible and the grants go out, could be replenished, or not replenished, just totally like out within a couple of days. So if that's the case, we want to make sure that we're prepared, that the SBA has, you know, quickly communicated that to Congress so we can tee up a quick replenish. And this, again, one of the more bipartisan, one of the more common sense, one of the more unanimously supported provisions of the American Rescue Plan Act, because it came from a bill from Senator Wicker and Senator Sinema together on a bipartisan basis, that we should be able to get more money in. And again, the fact that the Senate Majority Leader has already indicated that's a very strong point for him. He wants to make sure that, you know, we can get more money here if necessary. And again, we fully expect that to be the case. So the actual bill that will end up doing that, we haven't seen any sort of legislative text on that yet, because there's also a decent chance that we'll have to address something in the eligibility or the rollout, because you know that there is specific pieces that are supposed to incentivize getting money out the door for minority-owned businesses, the very smallest businesses first. I have no idea how I just muted myself. So sorry. My hands are not on I got them right here. But anyway, so I think maybe it looks like everybody's muted. So it counted me as well. So again, we'll have to see exactly what that looks like in terms of making sure that the actual rollout of the fund matches the intent of the bill that we passed. So I think that will be something important to keep a very close eye on. And, you know, again, to kind of put the bow on it, we're very fully expecting to have to go back and put more money in, because if it's anything like the first PPP rollout, which was, you know, like gone in a snap in the first week, and then at least we have a sort of baseline for, okay, this is exactly how we need to approach replenishing it. So again, we'll have to see exactly what the timeline lines up. You know, I think that, and this is to another point again that I mentioned at the beginning, how SVOG and RRF kind of go together. If some businesses find that it makes more sense for them to get one over the other, I think the SBA is going to want to see exactly which one is a little bit more popular. We believe that just based off of the raw money that you can get and the applicability of who's eligible and what you can use it on, the restaurant fund is going to be significantly more popular. But we have heard a lot from, you know, independent venues across Michigan and a lot of folks that have, you know, tasting rooms within showrooms within, you know, live venue. It kind of all is going to blend together too. So some folks are going to be, you know, eligible for one. We imagine that the majority of folks that are eligible for both, again, will go for the restaurant fund, but we do have to see exactly where that kind of lines up.
All right. From Jeff Neely, with regard to the idle that was just discussed, if you receive a max of 150,000, can you apply for the additional funds with the increase to 500,000?
The short answer is yes. If you have loans approved prior to April 6th, you will be eligible for an increase based on the new loan maximum amounts. So quick and easy answer is yes. If you got an idle for 150,000 and you think you're eligible to go back and get the other 350,000, hypothetically, you could go and get more.
All right. Another.
Really quickly, I want to also clarify that the application will have up to 2 years after the date of the loan to request that additional funds. So you don't have to do it immediately. You will have a 2-year timeline to request for that, because again, we're going from 150,000 as a maximum, but over 6 months of loss to 2 years. It'll be 24 months and a $500,000 maximum. So you'll have time to go back and request additional money from EIDL.
All right, this one is from the University Club, where they have just become eligible for the first draw of the PPP loan with the addition of a 501c7 organization as eligible. Can you first draw PPP loan, PPP be used to retroactively apply for the 2020 expenses, since we had to struggle through all last year with no assistance?
So I believe the answer is yes, that we extended the covered period for the first draw PPP loans. Obviously, again, I kind of mentioned that we've just extended. And so there were a number of significant changes. Again, the inclusion of all 501Cs. This is something that we progressively addressed and honestly should have been addressed in the first PPP bill in the CARES Act. And so I believe that the covered period, again, will cover, you can use that fund even if you just became eligible to cover 2020 expenses. The answer is yes. I want to find the exact specific, I believe it was pushed out just as we did through the application process, the May 31st, but I will triple check to find the exact last date that you can use those funds. But I believe that yes, you can use it for 2020 expenses.
Another question from the chat: will the restaurant relief funds be given out on a first come first served basis to eligible restaurants?
That is something that we're going to have to see in the application process. Again, there was explicit language in the bill to make sure that there was a specific set aside for the smallest businesses and for minority-owned businesses. However, in terms of how they will actually go out and if it's going to be on a basis of need or if it's just who gets there first, that is unfortunately unclear to us at the moment. And that's going to have to be largely determined by the SBA's guidelines as they roll out the application process. Because again, we saw with, it's kind of weird to just continue kind of dunking on the PPP, but they had a lot of problems that we saw, Ruth's Chris Steakhouse, Shake Shack, the LA Lakers, right? Some of the first folks to get the PPP loans. And I think that, that was clearly not the intent of Congress. And so we were able to do a better job of addressing that in future packages to make sure that those that are actually in need of immediate assistance are the first ones to get it. So that's been expressly communicated to the SBA. And again, there is specific language to create set-asides for those groups. But in terms of who will actually get the money first, that will largely be up to the Small Business Administration to figure out. But again, it's been very clearly communicated to folks that this should go to those that actually needed help and needed the most.
That brings up a question that I received on the franchises where you are not supposed to have more than 20 locations. But if someone is a locally owned franchise and basically operate everything without and pay franchise fees, are they eligible to apply for this, say, Texas Roadhouse?
Right. So this is one of, and we heard in this testimony too, that this is something they're going to take a look at. Our gut, at least in reading this, is that they would not qualify. However, we know that that's clearly going to be a problem because if you are, a franchisee and you are the sole owner of your location, you not only care, but your obviously primary focus is your restaurant, right? But if you do fall within a larger restaurant group or a chain restaurant or a franchise, whatever, the way that the bill is written is that you would not be eligible. So again, as of right now, that's the way that we are interpreting it. However, we'll have to see if the SBA is going to address this because this is, we've heard from a lot of different folks that, again, have been hurt, right? This doesn't matter if you do, own and operate a Jimmy John's or Baskin Robbins, Texas Road, whatever. The fact of the matter is that you are probably feeling the impacts economically of the pandemic just as much as, a mom and pop that has one location. It's not a specific to one set of restaurants pandemic. So that's something that we're gonna have to keep a close eye on. But again, as of right now, until we hear directly otherwise from the SBA, I would say that, they would not be eligible at the moment, but we'll have to wait and see if that's something they're going to address, because again, this is something that we're hearing about a lot. And I'm sure that the SBA has also heard a lot about this as well.
Another question, if you qualify for both the live venue operators grant and this grant, which one would you apply for? Which one do you think would be the better one to go with?
So I touched on this a little bit earlier, but I do think that just based, again, on the application of uses and the eligibility is a little bit more flexible, and the fact that there's more money in there, and even though there is going to be a significantly larger demand, as we're kind of feeling out, it still seems that we would likely have folks, we would point them in the RRF direction. However, it's going to be a little bit of a catch-21, because at the same time, the more folks go toward the restaurant fund is that if you are eligible for both, the fewer folks are going to go to the shutter venues. So there might be a little bit of a larger chance that you get that money immediately if you go to shutter venues. However, I think that we're going to have to see exactly how the rollout goes for shutter venues first. Because if we see that the $10 billion that's been allocated from the December bill for the shutter venues operator grant goes either really quickly or doesn't go very quickly, that might also depend and change the way that we shift folks in that direction. But again, just based off of the just pure number of uses and the maximum amount of money you can get, and just there's a significantly larger number of reasons why we would have folks go to RRF first. However, we don't see anything that will prevent you from applying to both. So if you can, and you have that ability, that you might as well take a shot, because again, we're going to have at least some period of time where shutter venues is available and the restaurant fund is not. So I also recommend that you take a hard look. I'm not an accountant, and I'm not, I know some things, but I don't know exactly what's going to be best for your business. So I think, you do want to take that with a grain of salt, that you take it at a very case-by-case basis and make sure, that you take a look at, what you'd be eligible for. Because again, like if you got a very significant PPP loan, and that would, again, weigh against your grant that you would get from the restaurant fund, then that's also going to very clearly have a significant impact on your decision. So it's gonna come and go based on exactly what restaurant's applying. But again, our first instinct is restaurant fund, if you were able to get money from them and are eligible for both.
Another question is, if you were supposed to open it's a new restaurant, you were supposed to open in 2020, but have delayed that until this year, or have not even opened, do you qualify to receive this grant as well?
So you do, and this is an important piece that was also brought up specifically in the testimony that was in front of the Small Business Committee as well, because this was one of those, kind of congressional oversight moments where we were worried that, if you're doing a lot of looking at 2018 revenue or 2019 revenue or 2020 revenue, that's going to determine how much money. But what about, if you haven't even opened? And so there is an explicit mention of that as well, is that restaurants that have not opened yet are also eligible and can receive, quote, funding equal to eligible expenses incurred before the date of enactment. So if that's getting your overhead costs, if that's mortgage payments, if that's rent, whatever. So want to make that very clear, is that you are eligible. Obviously, there's a very clear-cut determination of how much you're eligible for if you've already been open, because we know that if you, for example, opened in 2019, you take the average of your 2019 monthly revenue multiplied by 12 minus the average of your 2020 monthly revenue multiplied by 12. And then so that is where you can get how much money, and then you also subtract how much PPP loans. But, so clearly if you don't have 2019 revenue, you can't calculate that. So you're basically eligible to receive funding equal to eligible expenses incurred minus your PPP loans. So I want to make that very clear, that if you are a new restaurant, whether you just opened or haven't even opened yet, you will be eligible for the fund.
That's good. Looks like we have a question from Amber Clark. Marcy, can you? Yep. Go ahead.
Hi, I'm sorry. I'm just getting chills because I'm sitting here listening to this, and I'm in my head, I'm going, well, obviously, if you're a restaurant and you haven't opened, you're not in operation during this time, then you wouldn't be eligible. But now, pitter patter to my heart. Oh my goodness. So what? So what if in this given situation, they were unable to open due to like exorbitant cost now of construction, and that's due to COVID? Would that also be an eligible qualifying factor?
Yeah, I think so. The way that the bill is written gives a little bit of leeway specifically to what eligible expenses are. And I believe, again, that will have to be explicitly addressed in statute from the SBA. But in terms of congressional intent, like construction delayed by COVID or impacted by COVID would absolutely qualify as an eligible expense. I think a lot of folks that we've heard from are like, I had to do serious maintenance on my restaurant to provide better air filtration and to put in, better seating spacing and plexiglass and whatever. And so that would certainly be eligible expenses for what you'd be able to find in the grant. And again, we'll have to just see explicitly what is defined as, is that whole, is all of the cost of that going to be counting as eligible expenses that would be eligible to be covered by the fund? We'll have to see exactly from SBA, but again, certainly, anything that would be related to COVID eligible expenses, I believe that would certainly count.
Thank you.
Good stuff. All right, we got another question in the chat. If you take a PPP loan in 2020 and 2021, do you take off both of the amounts off of the grant?
The answer is yes. You have to subtract both your first and your second draw PPP loans from your final total of eligibility for money from the fund.
All right. Those are all the questions that I had previously submitted. Does anybody else have questions from the group? Throw them in the chat or raise your hand and we can unmute you and you can ask.
I see a question too that was provided. Sorry, Chris, if you want to ask your question, I had one provided in advance, but go ahead, Chris.
So I'm just wondering on the eligibility. I'm literally a dinner boat, and then we went 5 rounds of frequent asked questions and the shuttered venue thing, and I was like, yep, I qualify. And then after waiting a long time and the 5th version of their questions, they finally excluded us, even though we have live entertainment on every single event. And this next go around, I guess it's like in some of our locations we do food service, and in some of them it's catered in from the outside. And I'm wondering how like banquet facilities and things of that nature that aren't necessarily a restaurant but are and guidance from our Passenger Vessel Association says, yes, this is what you do. Go after this if you do food on service on your vessels. And I'm sitting here kind of scratching my head on this one to just like double check.
Yeah, I mean, that's a really good question and a very specific example. I know that we actually got a similar question from a food truck, which I know it's not the exact same, but like in terms of how big the umbrella is for who's eligible, right? And so I think ultimately, the onus is going to be specifically, can you say, yeah, like we provide a food service and we've got, the same sort of hard hit, attributes as a lot of other, brick and mortar restaurants. And I ultimately think, again, as long as you, at least the way that we read it, as long as you've got, eligibility in terms of gross receipts and that you can say, you were, providing that, and I don't know when your restaurant open or your business open, Chris, but I think, as far as that specific piece, again, I don't see why it wouldn't be eligible, but, as you kind of mentioned, there's going to have to be, I would be surprised if you weren't the only person that's going to ask about this, or you're going to have, other kind of, I guess, trying to find like niche kind of, not as quite as easily as defined, right? As your, your very clear, restaurants, to use some examples from Ann Arbor, like Grazie, or I'm trying to think some other ones that have closed, like a Real Seafood Company, et cetera, et cetera. So I believe that will be, and again, as long as you can also provide that, you use the funds for the same stuff, right? You still got payroll, and, you may not have rent in the same way, but you're going to have maintenance expenses and utilities, and, if you got employees and you got to pay for sick leave, like that's all going to be the same, right? As other folks. So I don't believe that we would see you be ineligible for that. But again, fingers crossed so we don't have to, go to battle with the SBA on this, but if we have to, and if we've got a constituent that's, very clearly should be eligible for this, but is not, then that's something that we can directly communicate with them. And again, fingers crossed we don't have to do that. And you can, you go on the page whenever it's live and you apply and you're like, great, got my money. But if that's a problem, that would be a great time for us to step in. We can get our Detroit team involved here and make sure that, we're going to bat for you to make sure that you get the funds that you need.
Thanks, Josh. I was actually going to add that, Chris, is just making sure that we, you all know that our Detroit team, our case team is here. They're engaged. We've helped out other organizations, restaurants across the state of Michigan that have had issues with their application process in the past, and they've been able to fix and address some of those issues, and they were able to qualify and get funding. So don't hesitate to reach out to us. We're here to help support you guys. And if you're going, hey, wait a minute, this doesn't add up, I should be eligible, or you're getting blocked because somebody out there stole your name or your code being able to access in. We've had all crazy type of situations that we've been able to address. So Chris, don't hesitate to reach out to us. Yep.
Does anybody else have any questions? I know, Josh, there was one that you wanted to answer.
Yeah, but I also see that Lorinda in the chat had a follow-up. So if you take both year amounts, you count both years of losses. So you don't. So I'll kind of give a really quick kind of rundown of how this might work. So let's say you're an eligible entity. You had $5 million of revenue in 2019, and you got $2.5 million, half that amount in 2020. You got a first round loan from PPP for $500,000, and you got a second round for $750,000. Again, this is just like a pure spitball, and this is something that the SBA gave. I'm basically just like kind of reading off their anecdote, but I think it's very helpful to understand. So what you would do is you take your 2019 gross revenue, which is $5 million. You would subtract your 2020 gross revenue for $2.5 million. So that leaves you with a total pandemic-related losses of $2.5 million. And then you would take both amounts of PPP. You take out the $500,000 and the $750,000. So that's $1.25 million. And so then your maximum restaurant fund grant amount would be $1.25 million. So you would have to, that's how it's calculated basically, is that you basically take both of your PPP, subtract that from the difference between 2019 and 2020 revenue. And again, that's obviously going to be very different for if you open in 2020, you would just take, your eligible expenses off of what you got and then subtract those two PPP loans. And then if you haven't even opened yet, again, that's going to be a pretty interesting can of worms that the SBA is going to have to address exactly on how PPP. But again, I actually don't think that's even possible because you have to have been in operation before March of 2020 to get a PPP loan. So I don't even know why I'm talking about that potential hypothetical because it doesn't exist. So yeah. Yeah, I think that's hopefully a helpful breakdown of how PPP loans that you've received will kind of impact how much you get from the fund.
All right, the question just popped up in the chat. I applied with my local bank for the PPP. Where do I apply for this grant?
So it will be through the SBA eventually, but that's the $1 million question is when and where and how, and is it going to be just a standard online form? Is it going to be a reroute? Like, we unfortunately just don't know at this point. But we do know ultimately that the SBA is going to be the purveyor of the fund. They're going to be the ones distributing the grants. It's not going to be from your financial institutions. But that's a very good question and a good flag because with PPP we were like, go talk to your banks, go talk to your credit unions, go talk to your CDFI, whatever. Whereas this one and the shuttered venue operation grant, I want to make sure that you know that both of those directly are going to be from the SBA. So again, we're waiting with bated breath exactly when the application process is going to go live. But when it does, you can be sure that we'll put that up on our website. We'll be sure to put that up very, very prominently on social media, and just everywhere. And we'll be in very close touch to hear about that exactly when that's going to be. Again, I know if people kind of jumped in late or whatever from the onset, we're hearing that it will hopefully be mid to late April. And we've got on the record testimony saying it will be sometime in April. We would obviously love that to be sooner rather than later. But we do have to wait at least for the shutter venue one to get moving so they can again see the problems with that and address them quickly. And at least when they're building these huge programs from scratch, so they want to have a foundation down first and then they could build off that for the restaurant fund. So again, fingers crossed it's soon, but ultimately it will be the SBA's where you go to apply.
And then if you want to address the question that you had.
That actually was it. It was any insight as to when the live venue grant are going to go live, and I was able to cover that. So yeah, again, fingers crossed that it's soon, and so we'll just have to see. And learn with another great question is, the funds will go fast. What should we do to be prepared? I think the best thing that you could do is just have that information, as I mentioned, ready and quickly available. I am not an expert on exactly what forms detail how much revenue you've got. And again, feel free to talk to your CPAs or whoever, does a lot of that accounting and financial work for your business. But you want to make sure that you have all that information readily available. Again, so it's going to be your 2019 gross revenue, your 2020 gross revenue, your PPP loans. And those are at least the first things that come to mind that you're going to want to have readily available. Because I can't even say like, this is what the application process is going to look like. This is what they're going to ask you for. But I just want to, make sure that at the very least you have those immediately ready. And that as we continue to get more clarity and more information from the SBA, we can kind of say like, oh, you might want to have this available too. I think also just, information to detail that you particularly, so there's the set aside for $5 billion for eligible businesses with folks that have made under $500,000 or less during 2019. If you have that information available to you, I would be sure to have that on hand just so you can get curved into that set aside pot. So that's something important as well. And so, yeah. And then again, as I mentioned, we're just going to have to kind of see what else they're asking for in terms of what exactly is needed for the application.
All right, we're going to take one more question from Chris, and then we have one more in the chat, and then we are going to wrap up. So Chris, go ahead and ask your question.
So with the PPP, when you're below a certain amount, the forms change around, and it's a fairly, you testify, you swear that you're doing everything right, and you're just not expecting that much degree of auditing and follow-up. And it sounds like these will all be substantially higher dollar amounts for the most part for a lot of individuals. Should we expect a lot of follow-up and auditing on the back end of this type of stuff, or is that something where we just have no idea?
I think if history has taught us anything, that there's going to be something. So I think ultimately, and this is something that we also wanted to address quickly because we heard, again, going back to, the PPP loans are going to the wrong people, and there's a significant amount of fraud both in PPP and EIDL. In fact, they landed on the GAO's high risk list of government programs, and that's something that we're addressing from the Senator's Homeland Security and Government Affairs Committee side. So I would imagine that to combat some of the problems that we've heard from PPP and EIDL, there will be something. But ultimately, in terms of exactly what that looks like, we have this very fine line to walk where it's, we want to get money out as quickly as we can, right? I think that has been very clear from the congressional perspective over the past year that we're kind of in the don't ask for permission, ask for forgiveness, basically, right? That's kind of how we've operated on a lot of these programs. And it wouldn't shock me if that was the same case for RRF. But, I do think the exact specifics will have to be sort of ironed out at a later date. I think that if they do a great job in the rollout and they ask for everything necessary and they have a much more stringent application process, then that might help cut down on that amount of auditing and kind of backlog and we'll have to see exactly what that looks like. So my short answer is I would be prepared for that, but we'll have to exactly see what the SBA is going to do.
All right, and the last question, this is actually a good question to end on. So there is the 21-day grace period for businesses that are minority-led, women-led, veteran-led. So would that mean that this then grant will be open up to the general public starting mid-May? Or will it open up everything and then they will give priority to those businesses?
I believe so. What we'll have to see, it's either one of the, it's kind of anybody's guess. So what they could either do is they can take all the applications, when the portal goes live and then process them on a priority basis in terms of getting those, as you mentioned, like women-owned, veteran-owned, minority-owned, or and I believe this to be the case as the University Club kind of pointed out that the SBA announced this, is that there's going to be this 21-day period for these smaller groups, and that will be like mid to late May before the general restaurant population can apply. I believe that will end up being the case, but there is still, we'll have to see exactly how that works. But again, I think that the University Club has a good read on this, is that it'll be, they'll roll it out. They'll say, we saw the president kind of do this with a PPP, where he was like, pause, like, we're going to give this 2-week block for MBEs, WBEs, VBEs. And I think it'll be the same thing here, but ultimately, and this is something that I wish that we could do concurrently, because, what we shouldn't necessarily be punishing folks that aren't these category by waiting, another additional 3 weeks for them to get their money and to process this. But ultimately, I think that, again, the University Club has a good read on this. And, this is something that, again, hopefully we see in the rollout of guidance, that we can find a way to dual track these. But I see, you got your hand raised. So if you wanted to go ahead and jump in and follow up, or feel free. Someone can unmute the, yeah.
I sent you the ask to unmute, so you should be able to unmute yourself.
So, it's a year of working from home. The Zooms and Teams. There we go. Yeah.
I'm just reporting what the NRA announced yesterday after, so in their 90-second update of the week, they said that they had just heard from the from Small Business Administration that they were expecting late April, and then there would be the 3-week window, and then so they referred to it as sequential.
Okay, that's really helpful. And we've got, I'm actually pretty surprised that the NRA did not directly reach out to us. We've got a great relationship with them, and we know that they're doing great work here on the Hill. But that's super helpful, because again, it's basically been whatever we can get from the SBA, like, we will happily take. And I know it's been very frustrating, to say the least, in terms of getting information out on a lot of this stuff. And so again, we've got, folks from congressional leadership that are really pushing them to get at least at least for shorter venue, the application process isn't live, but at least we've got like an FAQ on that. We've got some guidelines on that, and we're hoping we can get the same thing for the restaurant fund soon. And, fingers crossed that we get it some point, but that's really helpful. And so we, and this is something that will be very, I should have already been in close touch with the NRA on this before, so we can make sure that everybody's kind of on the same page here. But again, we will, we're happy to weigh in with them too and say, like, this should, we understand, again, the intent to get a set aside for smaller businesses and for VBs, for WBs and SBEs. But again, we don't want to punish the folks that are equally as reeling from the pandemic as this. So, but that's helpful. I really appreciate that, because there's been a lot, and I apologize for missing that. But now, I'm at least a little bit keyed in on that, and I can reach out to the SBA too to see if there's more on that too.
I'll forward it to Nicole, and she can forward it to you.
Perfect. And I think that's a really good kind of, I'll toss it back over to you, Melissa, but a kind of a good way to end it is that we want this to be a two-way street, right? We will continue to use you all as resources, but we want to make sure that you can do the same for us. Obviously, again, from the casework side, as we mentioned, the Detroit team is going to be the leads there, the liaisons there, and they're fantastic. But if there's anything else from the federal perspective, just, what you'd like to see in subsequent legislation, or, as we continue to tweak and refine and make the RRF the best fund that it can be, again, we're going to put more money in it. That's almost a foregone conclusion. So if there's an opportunity for us to address some of the shortcomings, we want to hear from you all. And so I know that Carly put her information in at the beginning, but I'm also just going to put my email here as well, so make sure that you can all have it. So you can reach out at any time and feel free to stay in touch, because again, you are also our constituents, and we want to make sure that we're doing everything that we can to best serve you. So there's me. And again, anytime, feel free to reach out. My email inbox does not have a limit, as I've learned in the pandemic. So fill it up with anything and everything.
All right. Thank you guys so much. Thank you, Josh, Nicole, and Carly from Senator Peters' office for answering our questions. Please make sure you keep an eye, do utilize these people. They are here for us, and you have the simplest little questions, send them an email. They will get back to you. So again, thank you for joining us. I'm going to kick this over to Marcy to end up. And then again, make sure you're checking out all of our social media sites because we're in deep with this as well. And so we're going to kick out information as soon as we see it from any angle. So Marcy.
Thanks, Melissa. Yeah, thank you for joining us today. Thank you, Josh and Nicole and Carly. Much appreciated. Wanted to mention that if you have questions also, we do have Steve Japinga, who is our public affairs manager and a great government advocacy or advocate for you guys. Please feel free to reach out to him. I will put his information in the chat unless he's doing that right now. He might be beating me to it. Unless, Steve, you want to say something, just cut me off. Also, this is recorded and we will be putting that up on our website. Give us a couple days to get the information over and I will email out the link to all the registrants on this event. Thank you very much again. Appreciate seeing all of you and hope we helped you a little bit today.
Can you, hey Marcy, can you unmute everyone? Because they're
I
still.
sent the unmutes to everyone. I'm not sure why that's not letting them do that.
Can you unmute Nicole? And Steve?
There, I can't say, I don't, oh, hang on a second. Let me do it again. There you go.
Perfect. Hey, thanks, Melissa. Thank you, Marcy, both of you for helping pull this together, and Steve for your support as well. And I know Steve was on the call, but he's been a great asset to us as we try to connect with the members throughout the region. And like I said, we're here and available to help support you in any way that we can. And as Josh mentioned, as soon as we can get some of the SBA guidelines and details, that's going to be out there and available. As he said, go to visit our website, make sure you're connected with us on social media. And then soon as we receive details on the staff side, Carly will make sure that the team here, that both Melissa and Marcy and Steve all receive some of the guidelines to help provide some additional support. So thank you all for joining today and look forward to coming to hang out at some of your restaurants and bars.
Thank you.
And I can't echo that enough. Really looking forward to getting back home and God, get like, the Obrons here just don't taste quite the same. And I know, I'm very much looking forward to getting back.
We're getting there. We're close. You'll have to fly into the airport.
Yeah, very true. Awesome, everybody. Thank you so much for your time today. We really appreciate it. Again, feel free to reach out to any of us if you have questions or follow up, and everybody stay safe and enjoy the rest of your day.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, everybody.
Thanks, Josh. Great to see you.
You too.
Bye.